Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and happy Friday. Thank you for joining us for the second session of our PATA Innovation Series on digital marketing. Excuse me. The best camera is the one that is with you. So we'll hear about mobile photography. Just want to go over a couple notes, but hopefully you remember from yesterday. First, let me introduce myself once again. My name is Paul Brangan. I'm the Director of Communications and External Affairs at the Pacific Asia Travel Association, and I will be your host for today. Thank you so much for everyone for coming back for part two of continuing from yesterday's session. And as always, here's my quick notes just to remind you. You'll see at the bottom of your Zoom browser several functions. Just want to remind you, please remain muted and make sure your camera is off during the presentation. There, of course, as like yesterday, there'll be breaks within his presentation where you can ask questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to either drop them in the chat or raise your hand. You can just, in the reactions, just click on that. You'll see a function to raise your hand. You can raise your hand and Scott will then ask you to say your question, unmute yourself, even turn your camera off if you wish, and you can ask the question directly. Or if you're a bit shy, you can always just drop your question into the chat function. Also use the chat function to engage with other participants that are here. Say hello, how you're doing, even comment about some of the things that you're seeing in today's presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome back for day two of this workshop, Mr. Scott Woodward. Scott, how are you?
Great, thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. I will just quickly, I just need you to, I can share my screen then. I can put my PowerPoint on, perfect. Thank you for that, okay. So thanks for coming back today, guys. I am just going to do a very quick little recap of where we left off yesterday, just for anyone to catch you back up, and then we'll move through the last 4 modules of our 10 today. 7, 8, and 9 are going to be me kind of talking and sharing a little bit, and then 10 is going to be the interactive one. So just one thing, Paul, that you didn't bring up, I just want to make sure everyone who's here got a link to download from WeTransfer. There, you should have received a link. If not, maybe Paul can stick it in the chat for us, or Alm can stick it in the chat for us. But it's to download 2 of my iPhone photos, as well as an app called Snapseed, which is a free app from the Google Store. There you go, perfect. It's in the link is there. So if you don't have that, please go there and get those and put those photos onto your camera roll. Save them on your camera roll on your mobile device, and we'll get to them later. So perfect. So with that, let's move on here. So hi again, everybody. I'm Scott. You remember me from yesterday. I'm a photographer based in Manila right now, sitting in Manila. This is what we went over yesterday. So we basically learned about 6 things with our mobile devices, top 6 things. So number 1 that we covered yesterday was about being a tourist in your own city. Number 2 was about focus and exposure, how to control our devices and move them from being sort of automatic cameras to manual cameras. Number 3 was rule of thirds and rule of space. How to compose, some compositional rules. Number 4 was about interpreting light and creatively doing that. 5 was about how we can make our landscape photos a little better, and 6 was about portraits, so getting close and closer. So just one example from each. So this was my hometown for 25 years, Singapore. So just about encouraging us to get out and sort of now more than ever see our own backyards with fresh eyes. Number 2 was about our focus and exposure. So you remember that what I expressed yesterday is that when you bring out your mobile device, the camera will automatically focus on whatever is closest to the lens, okay? So what we want to make sure is that if we want to move that focus around, we just use our fingers around the screen to do that. The other thing that happens is when you choose a focal point, or the camera chooses a focal point for you, it makes a corresponding exposure. It chooses one, and then we are able to either brighten or darken, increase or decrease that exposure just by taking our finger and sliding it up the screen or down the screen. You actually see your mobile screen getting darker or brighter, and that's the great thing about mobile devices, that what you see on your screen is what you get, right? Number 3 was about rule of space and rule of thirds. Remember, we talked about how to turn on a grid on your phone and to use that as a compositional guideline to help us make more compelling imagery. 4 was about light and shooting at those golden hours of the day if we can, and even blue hour, which is a bit later at night, but really looking for nice light and helping us to make those most creative images. Number 5 was about landscapes and how they can be so interesting, but my belief is we can make them more interesting by just adding a splash of color or a human element to it, which helps give us scale, perspective, and drama. And then the last one we talked yesterday was about portraits and about getting close. And when we think we're close to people, getting even closer, right? So getting right up there and showing the expression on their face. So yeah, so that is where we left off yesterday. So if there's no questions about yesterday, then I will proceed to go on into today's lesson. So I am going to go there now. So what we're going to talk about today, number 7, is about the flash, okay? And the flash on our mobile phones is not a great tool, okay? But that doesn't mean that we can't work in the nighttime, because low light doesn't mean no light, okay? So what I like to do when I'm shooting in low light areas, especially creatively, is I like to turn off the flash on my device. Essentially, it's not a very powerful tool to help us. It's fine if you want to take a selfie or a picture with you and your friends having dinner or something, but as a true creative tool, the flash on our mobile devices is not a great one. It's like a little tiny LED flashlight. The color temperature is a little bit different versus the natural light. It's located directly in front of the subject. It's right next to our lens. It's not very powerful. So there's a number of reasons why I'm not a big fan of it as a creative tool. So I just turn the flash off, okay? But something we need to remember when we turn the flash off on our devices is that 2 things happen automatically with the camera, okay? Number 1, the ISO of the increases. And ISO is essentially the sensor, the camera sensor's sensitivity to light. And what happens is the sensor becomes more sensitive to light, which allows us to shoot in lower light. But the byproduct of that is something called digital noise. So our photos will look a little grainy. Okay, just something to bear in mind. Another thing that happens when we turn off the flash and we're working in low light is that the shutter speed slows down. So what happens is the shutter stays open a little bit longer to allow enough light to bleed into and expose the photo. And what that means is that if we're not holding the camera exactly still, we could end up with blurry images, or it's called camera shake, okay? When you don't hold the camera exactly still and there's a little bit of blur. So it's just something to bear in mind. When I'm taking photos in low light, I like to basically brace the device, my elbows against my chest, okay, and kind of create so that I'm nice and stable by holding it there, not holding it out in front of me where it's going to be kind of wobbly, but back up to me like that. Or, you know, we can also rest it on a table or on a railing or on the back of a chair or something like that, okay? Another thing that we can think about in low light is to actually consider photographing silhouettes. So what that means is that we underexpose the foreground, and I'm going to show you how to do that now, okay? However, before I do, there's something really cool on both Samsung and Apple devices. And on Samsung, it's called bright night mode. And on the Apple devices, it's called night mode. And essentially, what these are it's a clever way of the camera, the device, the phone rather, using a combination of the hardware, so the camera sensor and the processor, and the software, so these kind of machine learning algorithms, and it gathers as much information. And what it does is it takes a number of different frames rapidly, very, very quickly in a low exposure environment. And then it basically blends them all together into a single photograph, something that would be impossible to make otherwise, okay? And so what I've done here is I've circled on the screen. So night mode is something that if you have an iPhone 11 or 12, it comes on, it's there. Anything older than that, it doesn't exist yet. It's a newer device. So a newer attribute. So when it is dark, okay, and you don't have a flash on, you will see in the top left-hand corner of your iPhone, this little yellow sort of box that says 3S or 2S or 1S, okay? And what that basically is indicating is the number of seconds that the shutter will be open. The night mode goes on automatically, okay? And what that means is when you're taking it, when you shoot it at the bottom where I've circled, there's gonna be a little timer that goes 3, 2, 1, and it'll count down as you're taking the photo. Okay. Now you should try and hold it as still as possible when you do it, but the camera is pretty good at having an internal stabilization, and it'll blend all these pictures together and it will create kind of these impossible images that you couldn't make otherwise. So it's a very, very interesting little attribute, and one that I encourage you to play around with in low light. Also exists in Samsung. Unfortunately, my circle there somehow got deleted, but it's in the bottom left-hand corner there called night. It's the little moon, so night mode. So it's the same, exactly the same idea. So if you have those, it's just something to play around with. So I'm going to show you some examples now of low light, silhouette, and night mode photos. Okay, so we talked about silhouetting, backlighting. So this is an example of that. So one of the biggest complaints or feedback I get from people is that sunsets look really nice to their eyes, but when they go and take the pictures of them on their phones, they don't look as good. Or when they take pictures on their cameras, it never looks as good, never looks as vibrant. Well, one of the main reasons why is what we covered yesterday, right? And it's really about exposure. So the cameras like to brighten things up automatically to try and create these perfect exposures, but we don't necessarily want that. So this is an example of a time when there was a wonderful sunset. It looked like this to my eyes, but in order to take it, what you have to do is you just focus on the subject. You pick your subject. So in the fact, this one, it was the lady in the middle, or the children, and then the camera exposes, then it's bright, and I lose in my screen. I don't get all the light and the color. I just slide my finger down. It basically brings the exposure down, and you start to see more of that color and more of that light come into the sky. So that's the way that you achieve this. So this is how we can work with silhouettes. When the light is brighter behind our subject than it is in front of them, we have really no choice other than to either flash them, which with a mobile device is not going to be possible, as we established. The flash is just not powerful enough. Or we just go with it and underexpose them and create a silhouette like this. This is another example of silhouette, exactly the same thing. So here I have another added element of a campfire in the front, but this is my brother in Canada. So you see we have the sunset, he's chopping wood. I've got the fire here in the foreground. So exactly the same idea, just focusing on him, underexposing the photo, bringing it down, we get the closes in, we get the silhouette and the color in the sky. I took this in Bangkok, actually, a portrait of a hip hop musician at a studio. So this was the environment I had here, was this cool wall, this pattern that was being created on the wall from the light fixture, which was neat. And I was like, wow, that's a really cool thing to have there. I'd like to capture that. So if I put the man in front of it, I have two options. I either expose for the man, so that means brighten him bright enough that I can see him, or I expose for the wall. Well, if I expose for him and I brighten the scene up, I lose all of that detail, which I don't want to do. So I just made the decision to expose for the wall. I get a bit of the light just kissing the top of his hair, and I get his silhouette, his edge in there. It's good enough creatively, and I still maintain the wall. I think we've all been in these types of environments where we're inside of a restaurant or a cafe or something, and there's a neat scene outside. You know, if we're going to photograph that scene and get it exposed properly, we have to we can't get everything inside the area exposed rather as well. We can't see the man's face and see outside. It's just not possible when it's a backlit situation like this. So what I've done here, I've just gone with it, focused on the window, underexposed it, brought it down, I create a silhouette, and I get that detail and color outside. Okay, this is in Singapore. Same idea, we have the fire happening here, okay? So just using the fire as only the light source, no flash. A flash would have eliminated some of the drama. It would have brightened up the scene, at least in the foreground, too much. Wouldn't have given me that drama. So I just basically underexposed the photo, and away we went, okay? Again, exactly the same idea, all right? So just using a single light source. So essentially getting up close on the subject, focusing on them, and then using our finger to adjust the exposure and find that drama, just bringing it down a bit. And you can see exactly what I mean by low light doesn't mean no light, right? There's not a lot of light there, but there's enough to expose and create that dramatic image. Okay, and then an example of night mode. So I talked about night mode. I've got two examples here. This is in Singapore, right? So this is, you can see, again, I talked about blue hour yesterday, that magical time, but this night mode allows us to get these multiple levels of exposure, because what it's doing is it's taking many different pictures very quickly, and then it's blending them all together and giving us one image, okay? So this is, you don't have to turn on night mode. It comes on automatically on your camera, on an Apple device anyway. In a Samsung, I think you might have to click the night mode button. But yeah, so then you're able to create kind of these multi-level photos that are blended. And then one more here. This is actually here in Manila. This is from my balcony at my apartment, but this was also, so you can see the full moon up there in the corner. This is a long exposure, again, 3 seconds or 4 seconds, using night mode. So it's taking a lot of pictures and it's blending them together, and I get that multiple levels of exposure, right? Where the sky is still blue. This is blue hour. The sky is nice and blue, but I still get some detail in the other areas of my frame. And then last example, this is in Singapore. Okay, so this is same kind of thing, night mode photo. Again, I shot this handheld at a 2 or 3 seconds, because as I said, when you're shooting night mode, you have to want to keep it still. If you're shaking it all around, it won't work, but just your human holding it, it's still pretty good. The camera's pretty good at stabilizing, and then blending all of them together, and you get these kind of pretty amazing images that are a lot like HDR type images, right? Where there's all kinds of levels of exposure in the light and in the dark. So yeah, so that is about night photography, silhouettes and night photography. Low light doesn't mean no light. So any questions or comments on that? Or I shall move on to number 8. Okay. All right, number 8. Number 8 is about taking risks, really. Okay, so our mobile devices are far easier to manage than a DSLR camera, right? We don't have multiple lenses. Our mobiles are much lighter, they're more compact. It means that we can hold them more easily and more effortlessly use them to make interesting photos. So we've kind of been building up on these themes, but our iPhones or our Samsungs are great tools for taking advantage of that and being on the lookout for things like creative and dynamic angles and experimenting and pushing ourselves outside our comfort zone. So some of the things that I like to do with my phone and while I'm taking is, you shoot without looking at the screen. I'll show you some examples where you don't exactly know what you're going to get, but you can still make some interesting things. Tracking a moving subject or shooting in low light with movement where we get a little bit of motion blur, which is a great way to kind of add a little bit of life to a 2-dimensional image. About changing our point of view or perspective. So getting really low on the ground and shooting up, okay? We can put a phone right on the ground, or getting up high on a balcony or a bridge and holding it out and shooting down, so we can change that perspective for our viewer. Some of the things I've talked about a little bit, but I'll show you some more examples of. So about being keenly aware of our surroundings, right? Looking for natural frames, symmetry, reflections. Most of the people I believe are here are on the call from across Asia. There's a lot of great rain in Asia. We get a lot of monsoons, a lot of rainy seasons. After it finishes raining and the sun comes back out, which it often does in Singapore, you can look in those puddles and see really cool reflections. So that's a good way to get that reflection and symmetry that happens. I like to fill my frame with patterns and textures. The human brain is pretty good at imagining what's beyond a scene. So we don't have to show the whole scene. We're getting close. We can kind of imagine and just show a little bit and imagines. Or the opposite thing, we can leave a lot of space like we've kind of did with the landscape pictures where we added a human that just takes a little bit, and that's called negative space. And then the last thing that I really like to do, one of my favorite techniques for any type of photography, is about stacking my scene. So creating layers of interest in my photos. So I have a foreground, a subject, and a background, and that creates depth. And I'm going to show you an example of that. But again, it comes back to how we work on our focus. Okay, so, but sort of in conclusion, the more creative we get, the more we learn about what works and what doesn't work, and the better our photos will be. Or maybe, like happens to me a lot, you just get lucky and you make a beautiful accident. So that's nice when that happens too. So, this is an example of, and I hope you can see kind of all of our lessons building in from yesterday as well. Okay, so there's a lot happening here that gives us this. We have a human element in a landscape photo. We have a bright color amongst a stark area. We have a neat pattern and texture in the spiral staircase. I've changed perspective. I've held the camera right up above my head. I can't even see the screen, okay? I have rule of thirds, so she's off on the top left-hand corner of my rule of thirds. I have rule of space. She's looking into the scene. So there's a lot kind of build up to make this photograph. But we just go back to one fundamental thing. If this woman wasn't there, this would be a nothing photograph. No one cares about a spiral staircase with nothing on it. But having that little splash of color right in there and changing that perspective and showing it looks like the staircase kind of goes down forever, it's a nice added touch. So that's Okay, change your perspective up high and bringing together all the rules. This is the opposite. This is super low. I am lying on my stomach on the ground. But again, you can see a lot of the things coming together. I have repeating patterns and textures. I have rule of thirds. I have rule of space. I have golden hour. I have shadows. It's all of those lessons that we talked about kind of all build in to see how a photo can happen. Okay, one of Singapore's most iconic buildings, perhaps one of the most iconic hotels in the world, Raffles Hotel. So symmetry, it's everywhere around us, right? I mean, I lived in Singapore for 25 years. I must have walked past this hotel or driven past it 1,000 times. You know, but if we stop and look at it and really look at it, really look at our environment, we can see that there's symmetry in things all around us, right? So this photo I just took standing outside of the MRT station, walking by and being like, oh, wow, look at the light. Perfect symmetry, even all the shutters line up, everything, right? It's perfect. Talk about motion. So this is in Bhutan, but you know, it's low light, so it's late in the day. There's not a lot of light. So that means that anything that's moving fast will kind of be blurry because our shutter is open for longer to let enough light bleed in. Okay, so here I was taking a portrait of the monk. He threw his robe. As he threw it, I have that motion that comes. Again, you know, this all achievable on your iPhone or your mobile phone. All of these photos taken on my mobile devices. Okay, talk about changing perspective as well and kind of getting really creative, taking risks. Here I'm lying, this is my niece in Canada. I'm lying on my back on the ground and she's swinging right over top of me. Okay, so basically, you know, we can get clever with these cameras. They're not big lenses. They're not really heavy to have. I mean, I didn't, but I could have taken this just by setting an automatic timer on the phone, putting the phone on the ground and letting it rapidly take some photos as she swung back and forth. But so there's lots of ways we can get clever with that. If you have, again, for the Apple crowd, which I use Apple, but if you have an Apple Watch, you can actually trigger your Apple Watch. You can trigger your phone, pardon me, your camera from your Apple Watch. So you could set your camera up in an environment like this and trigger it from your watch. So you can actually shoot from your watch. So you can put the camera anywhere. So that's a way that you can get clever with that as well, by putting your camera, your phone in kind of weird places that you can't be at, and then triggering it with your Apple Watch. This is here in the Philippines. We talk about symmetry and things like that. So this is, you know, obviously the Bangka boat's very famous kind of boat design. But, you know, we have this late afternoon, beautiful golden light. It's the light's low and the sun's low in the sky. It gives us that reflection in the water. Bring your lens low and you get that nice, perfect symmetry in the photo. Some of my friends on this, particularly Liz, will recognize this very well. This is the entrance to 1880, a club in Singapore, a members club. But you know, there's kind of these neat kaleidoscopes, everything with us. So the idea that we want to carry those devices with us and then be aware of our surroundings, right? These interesting lights, interesting patterns are all around us. And by having that phone, we can kind of take a chance. So I was riding up the escalator as I shot this. Okay, and then lastly, okay, so I talk about depth and stacking a scene. So this is a great example of our very first lesson, our very second lesson yesterday was about focus and exposure, right? So when I held my phone up to take this photo, so I saw the prayer flags and I was like, ooh, that would be a nice natural frame. Okay, I want to naturally frame Tiger's Nest Temple between it. When I held my phone up, it would have automatically focused on probably the orange prayer flag or the green prayer flag, one of them at the top, whatever one was closest to my lens. It looks like the orange. So it would have focused on that. But that's not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on the temple. So what I did, I just took my finger, I touched the screen at the temple, the focus shifts back from the prayer flags to the temple, and the things that are closest to the lens become soft and out of focus now because they're so close to me. And what I've immediately done is I've created a natural frame and stacked a scene and made a level of interest where the viewer kind of feels like you're peeking through these prayer flags to reveal the tiger's nest. So that's a technique that I really like to do with lots of things. We can do it with flowers, you can do it with trees, you can do it with anything. You know, even if you're taking portraits of people, putting something in the foreground and then photographing them, colorful flowers in the foreground will become all out of focus and you have some nice sort of interesting elements leading in. So yeah, so that is sort of number 8 about getting experimental with all the things we talked about. Any questions, complaints? Anything? Okay, then let's move on to number 9. So number 9 is really about a philosophy. And so I like to share this with people. So the most valuable piece of constructive criticism that I ever received was from my photo editor at National Geographic magazine. And way back when I was first wanting to shoot for the magazine, I was rejected. And I remember exactly what she told me was that she found that my imagery was too contrived and too posed, and that National Geographic was more interested in organic, authentic, natural moments than posed things like that. And at the time, I guess I was learning. I was young. I was still honing my craft, finding my voice. Okay, so I took that feedback really to heart, and I practiced very hard to come up with to change the way that I made pictures. And I developed a style that I call, this is my words, the moment between the moment. Okay, and what I mean by that is that the moment between the moment is sort of that split second of spontaneity and authenticity that arises naturally if we give our subjects the time to behave that way, right? So what I mean by this is she taught me to become more observational in my environment, okay, to stand back, to watch for little patterns, little things. Humans have lots of repetitive techniques, right? So if you see someone do something and you like it, for instance, the way that they laugh or the way that they do something with their hair, odds are they're going to do it again. It's become like natural human reactions. We tend to do this. Okay, so basically, if you see a moment and you like it and you want a reaction from somebody, I find that if you stand back and you watch it, you can actually then start to anticipate what they're going to do, and you can be ready when they do it. And I call this kind of the moment between the moment. Okay, being there, being ready, knowing my device, and not influencing a moment, just letting it organically breathe and happen. And frankly, that advice that photo editor gave me dramatically changed the way I make my photographs, okay? It improved my craft, and it absolutely made me a stronger visual storyteller. So I want to share that with all of you today. I'm going to give you some examples of work that I feel meets that moment between the moment brief or remit, okay? So, this is in Bhutan. So I got 3 youngsters here kind of playing, they're with their archery sets. You got one kid shoelace untied, chewing on an arrow, another kid kind of too cool for school looking off, the other one, getting ready to, playing around. They weren't posing for me. I kind of stood and saw them. The light was nice. I didn't influence it. So these are just like these moments, these boys being boys, right? Another one is here in Tibet. This is in Lhasa. These guys were selling like caterpillars on the side of the street, and they were having an incredible time, laughing and joking and totally oblivious to me, really. So what I did is I just kind of came up, I hung out for a while, I sort of stood around, I crouched down, I took my phone, I kind of pushed it right up in the scene and snapped some pictures. They weren't bothered by it, they didn't change their behavior, and you capture kind of these real, authentic moments, right? This is on the highway in Myanmar. We stopped for a little bathroom break. These farmers are out in the field nearby. I went over and kind of said hello, and I thought it was a nice scene. I climbed right up on top of the hay where he's standing and throwing it, and he was throwing the hay right over top of me. So I was right down in that moment. He wasn't stopping. I wasn't directing him. It's just a real, true moment, right? And you can kind of capture and freeze these little moments. This is also in Myanmar. I mean, I'm not even sure if monks are supposed to smoke. I don't think so. But I walked into a room and there he was by the window, and the light was coming in, the smoke wrapped around his head. It was a nice little scene, right? So pull out my camera quickly, snap some photos, and I have that moment that I couldn't have scripted. It just was there and I was ready for it. This is my nieces in Canada as well. We'd actually been swimming and we were walking back to my Jeep, and the wall where I'd parked, the color on it matched their outfits a little bit. And I thought it was a cool wall. And I was like, oh, girls, go and stand up against the wall. I'd like to take a portrait of you. And they were like, oh God, Uncle Scott, you're so annoying and embarrassing. The tween behavior. So they kind of walk up, the one's like fixing her hair, the other one's looking to make sure her friends can't see what's going on. And I just snapped that moment, right? That's not a posed moment. The portrait that I wanted to make, I don't even know where the photo is. It's nothing photo, but it was that moment leading in to the moment where the nice little carefree, or not carefree, the opposite, but for me carefree, but for them this moment of vulnerability, I guess is a way to put it. It's also my niece in Canada, so they're in the backyard. I like this picture. They're hanging off the clothesline. We got the slip and slide. I did get a little wet making this, but right up at the thing, they're coming barreling down towards you. True moments of joy, of childhood, all those things, these moments that you can't replicate, that you can't manufacture. This is in Hong Kong, same kind of idea, right? I was actually shooting an ad campaign for Foot Locker at a tower exactly next door. Lots of people on my side where I was. We took a little break. My producer called a break for a couple of minutes. I went for a walk. I walked next door and there's nobody, just these women playing cards in the bottom of this high-rise tower. I quickly pull out my phone, snap a picture. They don't even look up at me, move on. The apartment block was multicolored. You can see all kinds of laundry hanging out. There's all kinds of different colored curtains. The building's different colors. It was like a cacophony of color. Simply making it black and white, I'm able to eliminate all of those distracting elements and you just focus on the subject, which is the ladies playing cards, which is really what I wanted you to see. And lastly, I guess we started with Boys Will Be Boys in Bhutan. We'll end with Boys Will Be Boys in Bhutan. So this is monks heading off for lunch. Again, they're running, joyous. No one's looking at me. They are just in their own world or on top of the world, so snapping and capturing those moments. So yeah, that is the moment between the moment. Are there any questions about any of this? And if there's not, then we will move on to number 10, which is our little interactive retouching portion of the show. Yeah. All right, let's do it. So number 10, so the lessons that I've given all of you, I've shared with you the 9, I hope have helped sort of share with you how we can take photos. Okay, so lots of tips on how we can take them better: composition, exposure, philosophy, all those things. But pressing the shutter and taking a photo is really only part of the creative process, right? Once we've created that photo, we often want to spend some time post-processing it. And post-processing or retouching or editing, whatever we want to call it, can help bring the vision that we have to life. Okay, and as we learn more about what we can and can't do with our devices, which I hope that you have, we can shoot more with intent. Okay, we can shoot more with a finished product in mind, and we can move from that critical move from taking photos to actually making them. Okay, so there's lots of different things that we can do in Photoshop, or the concept of Photoshop, Snapseed, whatever it's going to be. We can change our composition by cropping. We can color grade by giving it a mood, which is, there's lots of filters that can do, but we can do that manually as well. We can do lots of enhancement with brightness and contrast and saturation. Some of my favorite apps for doing this are Snapseed, which we're going to use today, but also the Photoshop suite of products, the Adobe suite of products. And, my philosophy, I should actually write it on this presentation, but my philosophy behind retouching, okay, and let's use Photoshop as a catch-all, as a concept. Photoshop can make a good photo great. Photoshop can never make a bad photo good. It just can't. So we have to have all the elements in place to make a great photo. So Photoshop's not going to make a bad photo good. It's going to make a good photo great though. So with that, I'm just going to give you a couple quick examples of before and after so you can see. Okay, a lot of my retouching is very subtle. All right, so on the left is the original photo exactly as it came off my iPhone. On the right is the edited version of it. Okay, so if you look at them together, you can see some subtle differences. All right, so what I've basically done, I've brightened the exposure slightly, particularly on the girl, so you can see that the woman, her face and her outfit is brighter and she pops out more. I've added a little enhanced sort of the vibrancy of the photo a bit by saturation. I've brought back a little bit of the detail in the highlight area at the top of the screen, the yellow area where beneath lanterns. You can see some more detail there. And that's really it, very subtle. So just making the photo kind of pop and stand out better. This is in Mumbai, I think, or Calcutta. I think it's Kolkata. But we have our chaiwala there in the market. Okay, you can see again, not huge differences between, but I've brightened the whole thing. I've added a little bit of vibrance and saturation. I've also cropped it. I guess I felt that at the time there was a little bit extraneous area at the bottom under his knee there. I didn't really need it. So I've cropped in a little tighter and brought you in closer to the scene. Yeah, that's it. Okay, this is an image that's backlit. You can see here, kind of give you an idea of what you can achieve. So even when we have backlit photos that sometimes we want to have, there's some great tools in our in Snapseed, which I'll show you how to use, which can bring back some of that detail in the foreground, help balance the photo. So that's really it, right? I've just brightened up, I balanced the photo, balanced the exposure a bit, pretty simple. Here, this is in Istanbul. I don't mind the photo on the left, to be honest, the women there on the bench having a cigarette. The thing that annoyed me about it was that there's all these orange workers, the orange crane, the orange workmen in their jackets. It's quite distracting to the photo. So it wouldn't be possible for me, well, it probably would be if I was super patient, but to remove all of those from the photo. So instead, back to the kind of thing that I talked about, I just make it black and white. All those elements are still there, you just don't see them anymore. They don't become something that your eye goes to. So it's a really great way to eliminate distracting things from your photo. Okay, left and right, the original one, the one on the right, you can see what I did here. Basically adjusted the exposure slightly, added some vibrance, added some contrast to it, create a more contrasty image, and then also put a bit of vignette around it so that the subject in the middle kind of stands out, right? Again, you can see here too, by the way, the symmetry. So what I've done, I've got really low to the water level so that we have that symmetry, and that basically right in the middle of the frame, the top and the bottom half of the frame are exactly the same. Okay, so you can see here, this is Tiger's Nest again, but the light isn't great. It's a bit overcast and dull. It's really not nice light, nice dramatic light. So I made it black and white, punched up the contrast. I brought back some detail on the clouds and made a much more dramatic photograph. All right, and last example. So this was actually here in the Philippines as well. So this, look, I had a choice here, right? What I really liked about this photo, about this composition, was all of the shadow play on the cushions. Okay, but she's obviously underexposed. She's a little too dark. So I had a choice, right? What I could do is I could either brighten the whole scene so that she is brighter, but everything gets brighter, and then I lose that detail in the shadow. So I didn't want to do that. So what I did is I just shot it the way it was. I exposed for it that way, and then I just brightened her up specifically, okay? Added a little saturation, warmed it a bit so the photo looks a bit warmer, a bit more golden, and there you go. Okay, and with that, we're gonna go to the 2 examples that I sent you today, okay? And I'm gonna take you through a little retouching exercise with that. So we have a landscape photo that I took in Canada, and we have a portrait photo that I took in Bhutan. So you should have those on your devices. So what I'm going to do is I am going to stop my PowerPoint, and I'm going to share with you my iPhone screen. And we're going to follow along here together in this. Okay, so what you should do now is we want to remember, when we're photographing and when we're retouching, we want to make sure that our screens are as bright as possible. So remember, go to your brightness first of all and brighten your screen up as bright as you can, okay? I presume everyone can see my iPhone screen, by the way. If you can't, please holler, but I presume that that's the case. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna open up Snapseed, okay? All right, so I actually have that up there. I'm just going to open up the landscape photo. So I'm gonna give everyone a moment to get that landscape photo up on your devices. So you can download it from the link. My friends at Pata just put that in the link again for us. So make sure you get that, put it on your camera roll, and then open up Snapseed and bring this photo into Snapseed. So I'll give you a second to do that, okay? All right. Oops. Sorry, I'm just going to go back to sharing my iPhone screen there again. I apologize. Okay, there we go. All right, so I presume everyone's got that up on their screen right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with tools at the bottom, and I'm circling that on the screen so you can see it. Okay, so at the very bottom, and I should just note, depending on what device you're on, the interface, the user interface of Snapseed varies a little bit depending on the age of your iPhone or the model, if you have a Samsung or an Apple. So these are roughly how it's going to be. All of the same components are going to be there for you. This might be in a little bit different place than mine. Okay, so every device looks a little different. So anyway, we're going to open up tools. Okay, you can see that when we open it, that basically up comes this little menu. Okay, so we're going to start with tune image. All right, I'm circling at the left. This is always where I start all of my photos. Okay, so I'm going to hit tune image. All right, and when we've done that, the photo looks exactly the same. Nothing has changed yet, right? However, if you take your finger and you touch the screen, you'll see that a menu appears. Okay, you touch it and you kind of slide your finger up and down, and you can see that there are different options, 6 or 7 different options, 2, 4, 7. Okay, so these are our adjustments that we can make inside the this first sort of adjustment area. Okay, so what I always start with, I personally always start with ambiance, and ambiance is a really cool a special type of contrast adjustment that Snapseed has. And essentially what it does, it controls the balance of light. So it really helps bring balance in throughout the image. So it's good for backlit images, and it helps sort of flat images with their depth and vibrance. So I always start at ambiance. So you go to ambiance, you just slide your finger left and right, and you can see that the picture, you can see at the top, that little bar moves along. You can see that the picture gets sort of very dull or more vibrant. Okay, so I'm going to give you my numbers as we go. I will emphasize there is no right or wrong retouching. It's the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Okay, but if you want to follow along with my numbers, you can, and you end up with the exact same thing. Okay, so I look at this, it's a little bit arbitrary. I'm going to go with, I don't know, 75. Okay, so once you choose that, now I go up to brightness. Okay, so I look at brightness again, the exact same thing. To the left makes everything dark, okay, to the right brightens everything up. So I want to darken the image a bit. I want to bring down some of the brightness because I want that sky to get more dramatic. Okay, so I'm going to go on brightness, I don't know, minus 30. Okay, then I'm going to go to contrast. So contrast does just what we think. It creates contrast between the brights and the darks. Okay, so if you go to the left, you can see that it becomes quite washed out and a little bit faded almost. To the right, you can see it get super contrasty. We obviously don't want that. So I will find a middle part for that for contrast. I don't know, maybe 30. Okay. Now, saturation. Saturation is essentially like a vibrance tool. It's going to saturate our colors. It's going to make them very vibrant and rich. Okay, so if you go all the way to the left, minus 100, we get a black and white image. Basically, our saturation, we've desaturated the image. We've taken all the color out of it. Well, in a sunset photo, that's probably not what we want to do. So we want to go to the right. Okay, so I'm going to go, I don't know, maybe saturation at 70. Okay. So highlights are the brightest areas of our image, okay? They tend to be the white areas, the brightest areas. So you can see if you go all the way to the right with highlights, all of the bright areas, the highlighted areas become more highlighted, much brighter. What we want to do is we want to bring some detail back into those highlights. So I'm going to go on the minus side of highlights. So I don't know, maybe minus 35, and you can see the sky. And by the way, at any point in time, you can just touch the screen and you see before, that was the original image while we started, and then after, and that's where we are right now. So you get a little idea of what our quick little adjustments are doing. Okay, shadows. Shadows is the exact opposite of highlights. Shadows are the darkest areas of the image. So if you go all the way to the left, you see that the dark areas get dark, okay? We're basically closing in the area, the dark areas. But if you go to the right, you see that they brighten right up, okay? So going too far and it looks fake. I don't really want to make a fake image. I want to take an image that looks good and make it look great, right? So I'm going to go on shadows. I don't know, maybe 20. Okay, and then warmth. Warmth is the warmth of our image. So warmth is, if you ever gone to the store and bought a light bulb, you know that you have two options. You either have cool or warm. Cool is like a blue to the left, right? And warm is like an orange. Okay, it's on the Kelvin scale. So I would like to give it a little bit of orange because that little warmth, that's going to help bring out that color in the sky, right? So I don't know, maybe 25. Okay, now none of these numbers are static. Like I could go back now and be like, okay, I'm going to make it a little darker. I'm going to add a little more contrast. You know, you go through and kind of dial it in the way that you like. For anyone who's interested, there are my numbers there. I'll hold them up on the screen for you for a minute. You can see what adjustments I've done if you wanted to replicate the exact same thing, but there's no right or wrong here. Okay, so you can touch the screen, you see before and after. If you're on a Samsung, by the way, or an older iPhone, I'm circling it now, the top right-hand corner, that is your before or after button. If you touch that, before or after. Some of the newer ones, the newer devices have it if you just touch the screen. Samsung on the older devices, you have to touch that little button. I should have mentioned that. Okay, so when you're happy with how this looks, you just, there's a little check mark in the bottom corner here, hit the check mark, and that locks in the little changes, okay? Now that doesn't mean that you can't undo it. I'm gonna circle here now. There's a little undo area. If you hit that, undo, it goes back to the original. If you hit it again and hit redo, it comes back to where you were. So you can't really make any mistakes. Like, you can always go back in time, it's fine. Okay, so very simple adjustments. You can see how we just basically went from making a good photo and making it great. Okay, so I'm going to show you one little trick here with cropping that we can do that'll help you, and then we'll go to the portrait and I'll show you some more stuff. So hit tools again, up comes your menu, and top right is crop. I'm circling it there. Okay, hit crop, and what you have is at the bottom all of these different sort of crop presettings. Okay, so you can choose whatever you want depending on what you want. If you want, for instance, a square image, you just touch square, and you can see now, you can see on there, those are our rule of thirds grid lines that come on. So it actually helps us with composing. So later, if we've taken a photo, we can bring it into here and we can use those grid lines in our cropping area to basically help create a better image, a more powerful image. So then you just take from the corners and you see you can drag however you want. You drag it around to where you're happy with the image, okay? And when you're happy with it, you just hit the check mark again and boom, there you go. There's before, there's after. And if you were like, whoops, I didn't mean to crop it like that, no problem. Just go back up here to your undo, undo, and there you go, you're back. All right. So now I'm just going to show you how to save this image, and then we're going to move to the next one. So export here in the bottom right-hand corner. You've done all your adjustments and you want to now save your image. So if you hit export, and this is very critical here, 3 options come up. 1, 2, 3. These are important. This is an important part. Save saves over the original file. I would never do this. Okay. If you've taken a photo and then you make it black and white and you crop it and you hit save, that original photo you took is gone forever. Okay. So now you can never make it color again. You can never uncrop it again. I would never choose save. That is not something that I would recommend. Save a copy. Save a copy it saves exactly what it said. It saves a copy. So your original photo remains, okay? And this saves a copy of the photo with these adjustments. The nice thing about save a copy is it's almost like taking a cake that has all the, you can go back. So all of the changes we made, they remain. You can bring the photo back in here and undo any of them you want later. So it basically bakes a cake with all the ingredients that later you can go in and add more sugar and taste it. No, I don't like that. Take away the sugar, add more flour. No, I don't like that. So it saves all of those adjustments. So that's saving a copy. You don't save over the original. You have a copy with changes that you can undo. And the last option is export. It also saves a copy, but it flattens it. So it basically bakes a cake that you can't change, but you do have a copy. Okay, so the original photo stays and you have this one, but you can't make any adjustments here to the original or to the saved one. Okay, so is that clear? So I would choose 2 or 3. Personally, I choose 3. When I do it, I just export. So I just hit export. Okay, and then if you go to your camera roll, you'll see right here, boom, there's your photo. It's the first photo in. Okay, so there you go. That's how we do a landscape and the quick adjustments we can make. All right, I know that I'm up against the clock here a bit. So if there's no questions, I'm going to go to portrait and show you some tricks on portrait, and then we'll wrap it up. Yeah. Okay, so go back to Snapseed. And in the top left-hand corner, there is open. Hit open. You're going to get a little error, a little message telling you that if you haven't saved that photo, you're going to lose it. Okay, fine. So we hit open and then find the monk, our old monk from Bhutan, and get it up on your screen. I'll just give you a minute to make that happen. All right. So we're going to go through exactly the same intro stuff that we did before. Okay, so tools here at the bottom. So select tools and then our friend tune image. Okay, tune image. Now, same kind of idea, right? I always like to start at ambiance, as I expressed before. It's just a preference of mine. So let's go to ambiance, and I'm going to open up ambiance to, I don't know, 45. Okay, once I've done that, I'm going to go up to brightness, and I'm going to play with the brightness a bit. So I don't know that he needs, I'm not going to make him any brighter, maybe just -5 on brightness, just bring the brightness down slightly. I like to create a bit of drama. Again, just remember, make sure that your screen is as bright as possible, okay? Brightness, so contrast, okay? So let's give him a little bit of contrast. I don't know, maybe 20, 25. You can touch the screen again at any time and you see kind of a before and after with just what those quick little adjustments do for us, okay? Saturation, okay, so like this is a pretty bright, vivid image already. You can see if I move to the right on saturation, he gets pretty red pretty quick. I don't really want to do that. So I'm just going to leave saturation. I mean, I might even bring it down a little bit, -5. Right, ambiance we did. Highlights, remember, are the brightest parts of our screen, of our picture, right? So we're going to go to the left and kind of, you can see if we do that, we bring a little bit of detail back into the clouds, the bright white clouds. I'm going to go -25 maybe. Shadows is the darkest areas, okay? So by bringing that to the right, we're brightening up the shadows a bit. So I'm going to give them a little bit of brightness, maybe 30. And there's no right or wrong answer, okay? And lastly is warmth, okay? So remember, to the left is like, gives us a blue, kind of cools the image, a blue tinge. And to the right is an orange, a warm orange. I don't think I need any warmth at all. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. So those are my numbers there. You can quickly have a look if you're interested in following along exactly the same. Okay, and you touch the screen, you get a before and an after, you can see. So when we're happy with the adjustments we've made there, just remember, tick that little checkbox in the bottom right-hand corner, and we're in. Now, here's a couple cool little tricks that I'm going to show you here with our man. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to show you a neat portrait trick. Okay, so if we hit tools again, up comes our menu. Okay, and there's something called portrait. And I'm going to circle it here for you. Again, it might be in a slightly different space depending on what user or interface you're using, but portrait is there. Okay, so hit portrait. And what portrait does is the algorithm recognizes faces in the screen. So it immediately recognizes that there's a face. Okay, now what we're able to do, if you touch the screen, you see there's a couple of options: face spotlight, skin smoothing, and eye clarity. Okay, so face spotlight is really cool because what it does is it identifies a face. And if you go to the right, you can see that what we're able to do is brighten up just his face. Okay, so it's almost like a little floodlight, a little spotlight on his face, which is a cool feature. So you can just touch it and you can see how we've been able to brighten his face. Okay, so I'm going to go, I don't know, plus 25. Okay, skin smoothing. Well, look, skin smoothing is exactly what it sounds like. If you're going to do a beauty shot and you're all made up and you know, a nice lipstick or whatever, you want to make your skin look really nice, it's really cool. I'm not sure our old monk needs the skin smoothing, but you can see if we go all the way to the right, how his skin smooths out. Okay, so I don't think that we're going to necessarily do this with our monk today, but it's there if you want to do a beauty thing. The last one though is pretty cool. It's called eye clarity. And when it searches the face, it finds the eyes. So what we can do is if you go to like plus 50 on eye clarity, you can see that what it does is it brightens the eyes and it really makes them pop out. And it's a nice little feature that kind of mimics like a catch light in their eyes, in their subject's eyes. So it's a really nice little feature. So I like the face spotlight and the eye clarity a lot. Okay, so you can see before and after how that kind of pops out his eyes and you get a really nice dramatic portrait. Okay, so that portrait thing is really cool for portraits. So when you're happy with that, you just hit the little check mark. All right, now I'm going to show you one other really cool thing. So it's important if you kind of look at me on the screen, okay? So if you take 2 fingers, you see that you can pinch in and on your picture. If you take 1 finger and you touch it, you see that nothing happens. You don't move the screen around. You need 2. So if you take 2 fingers, you see how you can move your thing around. So it's like a pinch in, and then 2 fingers touching the screen moves it around, right? This is important for what I'm going to show you now, because you can see that 1 finger does nothing, okay? There's a reason for that. So if we hit tools again, and healing brush, okay? Healing is the 2 little band-aids, all right? So hit healing. Now, if you take 1 finger now and you run it across the screen, you see that it's like a paintbrush and his whole face goes crazy. So don't worry, we can just hit undo. It's at the bottom here, okay? So hit undo and it goes back. The reason this is important is because our fingers are fat. They're like fat paintbrushes, right? That's not really great for what we want here. So what we can do is we can take 2 fingers and we pinch in and we zoom down to this corner, the bottom. You can see he's got like some paint or something on his robe. So 2 fingers moves us around and gets us there. Once we're zoomed right in, as far as we can go, we can now take our finger and we can just brush it over top. And you can see that that paint just blends away. You take 2 fingers now and you can move to the other paint. Take 1 finger now and you can go in like that, and you can see how you can get rid of sort of stuff that's distracting, little dirt and things like that, okay? So that is a really cool little feature that we can do. I mean, you can even do it, you know, for instance, you look here, his eyelash, right? He's got this 1 eyelash. You zoom right in as close as you can go, you take your finger and you go down and boom, you remove his eyelash, right? When you're done, you hit the check mark and you can see before and after. Now that dirt is gone from his robe, which is a really cool little feature. That's a way that we can take things out of pictures. If there's dirt or there's something on the grass or whatever, you know, it's really cool. Last little one here, I got 3 minutes. So I'm gonna give you one more little trick. This is a fun one as well. Okay, go to tools here at the bottom. I don't know why anyone would use this, by the way, but it's kind of a fun one. And it's called a head pose. If you circle, you see head pose, hit head pose. What it does is now you can see, you can actually move his head which way he's looking. So I guess if someone was looking off the screen, you could actually move their head to make them face you. So there you go, before, after. It's kind of a fun little one. So there you go. That is all my tricks. Look, Snapseed is an amazing app for editing. It's my favorite one. It's totally free. There's so much stuff you can do in here, but I hope what I wanted to do today, I hope what I achieved is by giving you a little bit of confidence to go in and explore, and the idea that you can't really make a mistake, right? As long as you, and we're just going to do this one more time, as long as you save it correctly, right? So export when you're ready, okay? Don't hit save. It saves over your original photo, which nobody wants. It's gone. It's happened to me by mistake, and then it's like, you're like, oh my God, it's gone, and I've made it black and white, and you can never get it back. So either choose save a copy or export, and your original will always stay. So export, there you go, and we go back to our camera roll, and there they are. That is the one we just did. That is the landscape. So, are there any questions or anything at all from that? Down to 1 minute here, I think. Just gonna quickly go back, share my PowerPoint with you. Okay. All right, so this is what we learned today. This is our summary of today's lesson about turning our flash off, that low light doesn't mean no light. We can take risks and kind of build up on the lessons we had. My little Nat Geo sharing of my experience with them by capturing the moment between the moment. And the last one, you know, Photoshop can make good photos great, can't make bad photos good. So don't just take them, make them. And there you go. That is me. And that is my time. Exactly. There you are. So with that, if there are no questions, Paul, I will give it back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. Fantastic session. I think the feedback I see in the chat has been very, actually very positive. A lot of people are loving it. I love the sort of the little hands-on aspect at the end. I think a lot of people saw somebody saying their mug was glowing. So thank you
Yeah,
thank you so
good.
much, Scott.
My pleasure. No, my pleasure. Thank you. It's not. It's look. One of the things that I really love about photography is that it's. I think that it's kind of the most democratic art form there is. And not everyone can pick up a pencil and sketch or pick up a paintbrush and paint, but we all have cameras in our pockets, and I think what I love about that is that we can all use this to tell our own stories. So I encourage it as much as possible. So I love sharing. So thanks for joining me, everybody.
Well, and thank you once again, Scott, for being with us for the past 2 days, and I'm sure I will see some great photographs from all of our attendees over the next few days. If you do
Yeah,
take a photo,
please, and share them with me. Share them on.
yeah.
I'm on my Instagram here. You have it. I put it up there, but send it to me, and share me your stuff. I love to see it and be
Yeah,
a partner and talk to you.
yeah, tag us as well, tag Pada as well, and show us what you learned over the past 2 days. So thank you much, Scott. I'll let you go, and I'll do a quick wrap up before I
Okay.
close down the meeting for everybody.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. So you heard from Scott over the past 2 days. So I just want to make you aware of some of our upcoming webinars and events. So next week, we continue our innovation series. This is focusing on HR, the road to recovery for tourism roles and opportunities. Again, this is free for PADA members. Non-members or chapter members and youth can join, but with a small fee. So my colleague is also putting all this information in the chat as well. So you can see the links to register or to find more information about the events. Later on, this is on Thursday. This is with a webinar with our good friends at MasterCard. We're talking about rethinking technology and cyber risk. So the first one, was on Tuesday, and this is on Thursday. They're both at 3 p.m. Bangkok time. Again, this is, made a slight mistake. The one for Tuesday, actually chapters actually can join for free as well. Non-members, there is a fee for it, and youth as well. There's a small fee for it. The one on Thursday is free for PADA members, non-members, chapter members, and youth. There is a small fee to join, but please do join us. And this is next Thursday at 3 p.m. Bangkok time. And then later on the following week, it's on Saturday, September 25th, is our virtual Rural Tourism and Sustainable Development Conference. This is open to all industry, so please do register today. We have a really fantastic session, some great speakers. So I do encourage you to join, tell your friends about it, spread the word, and join us on September 25th. We also, next month is our virtual PADA Wellness and Luxury Travel Conference in March 2021. This is a one-day conference and a one-day March. So if you're in the wellness and luxury travel space, feel free to join us. Sign up now as a seller or a buyer, or join us just to join us as a visitor, or join just to come to see the one-day conference. If you have any questions about any of our upcoming webinars or events, feel free to email me. My email is paul@pada.org. You can find all information about our events actually on our website as well, www.pada.org. If you have any questions to Scott that you just came up to you now, feel free to send to me. I'm happy to pass them over to Scott, and I'm sure he'll help you also send a reply right back to you. And as I said, feel free to tag us with all the photos that you've taken from what you've learned for the past few days, and tag Scott as well. It'd be great to see what you've learned over the past 2 days. With that, very sensitive here. With that, thank you once again to Scott for the 2 days workshop. Thank you to our PADA members, our partners, chapter members, and of course our life members for the continued support for the association. None of this would be possible without their continued support and your continued support. And last but not least, thank you all of you for joining us for the past 2 days. Thank you, take care, and I'll see you next week.